Everyone, and I want to thank Merle especially and the Faculty of Management and whoever beyond that has been involved with allowing me to come here and give this talk. I think we may have to pull up me. Okay, let me tell you a bit more about me. I'll try and be brief, but maybe it will help the context a bit. I am actually a former Canadian, grew up in Canada, did my first 2 academic degrees at the University of Calgary. I started off as a computer scientist and found out I wasn't a very good programmer, which was, you know, the base level job that you're the entry level job you get when you're a computer scientist. But I was the very first computer science graduate at the University of Calgary, which pretty much begins to date me. And then I decided that I needed more education, and I minored in economics, so I tried a master's in economics. And I found out I wasn't a very good economist because I didn't have good enough math skills to be I wanted to be a college professor. And so I was resigned to going to work. I worked for quite a few years in the Canadian government and with a telecom company. And finally, I decided I have to go back to school. Well, because of my econ and computer science training, I'd ended up doing what people would call information systems work, decision support systems. And I was looking around and thinking, well, if I'm doing this stuff, maybe somebody's studying it. And sure enough, business schools were offering PhDs in information systems. So I trundled off to the United States, to Indiana University, which I was told was one of the better IS programs in the US. And working with a fellow named Bob Bostrom, who is still a close friend of mine, I was able to complete my PhD. And I did my PhD in a sort of a weird area, IT training. I was more of a technical person, but I ended up looking at how you can make it easier for people to adopt and use information systems. I thought that was an important thing to look at. And I also was looking at how that worked in systems where people had to collaborate using computers. And sort of that led me to where my research has sort of more merged into this idea of social learning software, which I'm going to talk about. Along the way, I was sort of stuck taking the job as a head of our school, which somehow turned into a deanship, and I did that for a long time, and it sort of pushed me away, a little bit away from my research interests, but also eventually got me involved in this social learning software dimension that I want to talk about today. And so I finally had the guts to resign as dean, and starting the previous July 1st, I've been back as a regular faculty member, and I was able to take a sabbatical for the first time in 10.5 years. So I thought with my sabbatical leave, I'm going to try and talk to people all over the place about the work we've been doing in our social software learning lab. So, tell you a bit about the lab. It's actually, in a sense, a virtual lab. We don't have a physical space, but we have 15 students, doctoral students, and a couple of alumni working pretty regularly on projects in the lab. And in fact, Merle was kind of tangentially involved even at the beginning of the formation stage. My co-director is now the new dean, Terry Ryan, and Terry was Merle's dissertation advisor. So there's some sort of whatever nepotism. No, that's not right. There's some relationship between all of us. But Terry's kind of more directly involved in administration, and I've been spending more time trying to move the lab forward, even though most of the things I'm going to talk about later on, after I give you some more introduction about what we do, projects that we've done, were supervised by Professor Ryan. And yeah, I think that should be enough. talk about that. So what's social learning? We've got something called Social Learning Software Lab. What do we mean by social learning? We use a very simple definition. There are specific definitions that psychologists and sociologists use. But we really talked about the process of people interacting in some way to form higher levels of knowledge among themselves as individuals and as groups. So, and obviously knowledge sharing can happen face-to-face, like we're doing right now. And knowledge sharing can also happen in a computer-based format, usually asynchronously, but sometimes synchronously as well. That would be, if anybody was there, we might be doing some synchronous, computer-mediated knowledge sharing, right? But I'm just talking to the ether. I gave a talk at Monash University in Melbourne, and they had a similar hookup, and I think there actually were 2 people at least listed, but they didn't have a video hookup to check, so I'm not sure that I've ever talked to anybody, shared knowledge with anybody virtually this way. And, okay, and the idea of social learning software is, again, very simple. It is information technology that, from a software standpoint, that supports social learning and helps to make the process, and hopefully helps to make the process of social learning more effective. So, by the way, you can stop me anytime and ask questions. I don't have any problem with that. So, setting the frame about social learning, I sort of have drawn a very simple representation of what we're trying to accomplish. That's the blue button in the middle of this diagram. And let me just explain the diagram a little more. A context is a place where social learning takes place. Like right now, we're in an educational context. We're in a university, and there's some sort of academic merit to this talk and to the fact that I'm trying to inform you about things. And if we have questions and answers, we'll be doing some kind of social learning in an educational setting, right? So it's an educational context. Most typically, we think of the educational context as the classroom phenomenon, just having classes and seminars, student-teacher, student-faculty interaction. So that's the education bubble, as I call it. There's also an organization bubble. Now, some people would argue that an educational institution is, in fact, an organization, right? So, by organization, I mean all the other institutions, public and private, that are formalized, that are